Thank you all for finding your seats and welcome to our inaugural Inside Scoop. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. Excellent. Do we have folks on Zoom? Welcome virtually and in person. I am Megan Shackney. I'm the Chief Development Officer here at Morven, and I'm really excited to share this evening with you and all the fun stuff that Jesse and Beth are going to share with you about our upcoming exhibition, Vail, the Mother of Invention in New Jersey. I'm just going to do a little housekeeping. First off, we're going to be recording the presentation for Zoom so that we can go ahead and send out that link on the heels of the event. Also want to let you know, for those in Zoom, if you have questions, please do log them in the chat so that we can go ahead and get them incorporated in the Q&A that will happen at the end of the evening. All right. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Liza Morehouse, Morven's board chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Megan, and thank you, Jill, for having me here this evening. And you and your whole staff have worked so hard to bring us to this point, and I just want to take this opportunity to thank you all and to congratulate you on a show that I know will be a great success. So good evening to you all here in the audience and here at Morven and in the Zoomiverse. It's wonderful to have you here at our inaugural Inside Scoop. We at Morven are very grateful and lucky to have wonderful, supportive, generous members, and we're pleased to be able to offer this members-only event. So if your friends find out how much fun and engagement you've had tonight and want to come next time, then you can help us out by urging them to join too. So how about Vail? I personally am excited to see this show because I had an early Bell Labs experience. I grew up near Buffalo, New York, and in my grade school days, I remember driving along an extension of the New York State Thruway that happened to go right past a Bell Labs facility. And on a number of occasions, when I was a pretty little kid, we were treated to the view of a man in a jetpack zooming over their parking lot. Seriously. And so for me, Bell Labs has always represented the magic of science. More recently, I've come to understand just how pivotal many of the innovations developed by Bell Labs have been in our world and in our civilization. I think it's very fitting that New Jersey was home to this pioneering entity, as it was home to some of our nation's founding figures and trailblazers in many fields. And Morven shares these characteristics. Tonight, we will get a peek at what is in store for us when the show opens on March 13th. I hope to see you all again and again, and that you'll come back and back while the show is up for nearly a year, and that you'll bring friends and family through, and I know it'll be a show that will bear revisiting. We have our Deputy Director and Curator, Elizabeth Allen, and our Assistant Curator and Registrar, Jesse Gordon-Simons, here with us to give you the Inside Scoop. This is their brainchild and the fruits of their labors for well over a year and closer to two. And they deserve many accolades and kudos for just a tremendous job altogether. Thank you both so much. And I will put our audience into your capable hands.
Thanks, Liza. That's great. Okay. So I'm Beth Allen. I have a lot of nice familiar faces out there tonight. I began here as curator in 2010. It's hard to believe. We've done more than 20 shows in that time. But I'm really happy to be up here tonight with Jesse Gordon, who has been at Morven since 2013, first as a registrar and now as an assistant curator. Jesse has always been a large part of the shows that you come to see at Morven, but so much of what she does is behind the scenes. And this exhibit is the first that Jesse has served as a lead curator. And you're gonna see, it's pretty incredible first show to have under your belt. Truly, this show is Jesse's brainchild. And she's gonna tell you more about how we got there. But first, just to make sure everybody knows what we do here, we do changing exhibitions on in Morven's second floor galleries. Our mission for these exhibits is to celebrate the cultural heritage of New Jersey. It's a wonderful mission that allows us to think broadly about New Jersey history, New Jersey art, and New Jersey culture. We have done shows on fine art, on New Jersey decorative arts, and New Jersey history, and we've done a handful of science-based shows. You might remember Puzzles of the Brain and Artist Journeys Through Amnesia, which featured the artwork of Lonnie Sue Johnson. And even before that, there was a show on rocks and dinos, which was really popular and featured the work of Benjamin Waterhouse Hawkins. We try to cycle through these themes as much as we can, following up a decorative arts show with a history show, with the idea that we'll attract new audiences and different audiences. For example, if you remember our Charles and Ann Morrow Lindbergh exhibit, it's a really serious history exhibit. We followed that with a pop culture show about Bruce Springsteen. And so now I'm going to pass it to Jessie. She'll tell you more about the idea in general.
All right, so in 2019, we were looking for exhibit ideas that would follow the art exhibits of Roosevelt, New Jersey, and Gerard Rutgers Hardenberg, which just closed. That same year, the show Marvelous Mrs. Maisel was on TV, and Abe, the father of the main character, actually works at Bell Labs in the show. I was remembering hearing about the undecided fate of the Bell Labs Homedale building about 10 years before this, and I put the pieces together and it piqued my interest. When we decided to look further into the idea, we realized that many of the defining moments that made Bell Labs notable actually happened here in New Jersey. We also found John Gertner's book, The Idea Factory, which provided a lot of inspiration and confirmation that there were so many interesting stories to be told. Our first outreach was to the archivist at AT&T, who helped us define the scope of our show. Of course, we wanted to focus on what happened in New Jersey. However, the story is not just the technical side of things, but also the people behind the innovations. This will be our first show really to focus on technology. And Beth is going to tell you how we actually cemented these ideas into an exhibit.
Okay, so of course, different exhibits require different amounts of research and time. When you do a traveling exhibit from a museum, it comes packaged, and we love to do those because it's not a lot of work. But a show like this, we needed to develop from scratch. And this meant a lot of reading. This is a little snapshot of Jessie's desk at home, which is a tiny bit of what we were reading. Neither of us come from a science or technology background, so we were stretching ourselves in new ways, to say the least. It became a running joke of how do you explain what a transistor is in 30 words or less for an exhibit label? And so this was definitely daunting at times, but we also saw it as a strength. We needed to write exhibit text for the general public, after all, not physicists and mathematicians only. Although we do live in fear of astrophysicists pointing out, actually. But we have fact-checked, and we had a lot to thank from our friends at the AT&T History Center and Archive, who were very gracious in saying, we think you mean this piece of the equipment or whatever. But really, before we could even get that far, we needed to figure out if there was really an exhibit there. A lot of times we have these great ideas and we think, oh, this is going to be great. And then we do some more research and it's oh, actually, that's probably better as a book or an article. What I'm saying is, what are you going to exhibit? What is the stuff? You need objects. And so as Jessie said, our first stop was the AT&T archives. And all we had to do is take one step into this warehouse to find out there was definitely enough stuff. There's 2 stories of archives, boxes of artifacts, gigantic artifacts, tiny artifacts, and thousands of lab notebooks that belong to the Bell Lab scientists, and thousands of photos. Here you can see Jessie cradling an early magneto foot telephone. And in the back there, that's Telstar 3. So we're literally walking among lasers and satellites and handling phones from the 1880s. We also made a visit to the history exhibit at AT&T headquarters. This is a corporate museum for AT&T employees. This helped us kind of visualize how some of these stories can come together. And then, of course, you can't talk about Bell Labs and not talk about Murray Hill. So Murray Hill Labs are kind of considered the jewel of the Bell system and labs in America. We were lucky enough to get a tour with Nokia now runs the site, Nokia's archivist, who gave us a tour of their exhibit as well, and got to see some of their cool technology innovations today. Okay, so once we had visited these sites, it was clear that we had covered the lab portion of the Bell system. Like, there was going to be enough there to talk about the incredible research and development that went on. But it was important to us to talk about the other New Jerseyans that were part of this story, people who worked not in the labs. And one of the things we quickly discovered whenever we were talking about the show to anybody was that either they were or knew someone who was connected to Ma Bell. Whether it was my aunt was an operator, or I was an operator, or my father was a lineman. And these people, when you add them up, are tens of thousands of New Jerseyans who worked in this gigantic system. This included, I found out, my grandfather, who I vaguely knew, but when he was a career electrician, had also been a lineman at one point. My father helped me dig up some ephemera that belonged to him, so you can see W.T. Allen's driving cards. There's like 10 of these at my parents' house, which definitely plays into this Bell system of perfection and testing and retesting. Like, everything was thought of. And so we also loved kind of gathering this ephemera where we could from places like that. So there's a few Easter eggs from William T. Allen in that exhibit when you see it. And then you see a great shot of operators out of Morristown, New Jersey. And then we also tracked down the Bell system commissioned Norman Rockwell to create this ad. And we just bought it on eBay, actually. Sometimes it's the easiest way so that we could just have it for ourselves and scan it. I think it was like $7.99. So as I said, we really wanted to make sure that we were highlighting all of them, and they are each prominently covered in the galleries. When we do big shows like this, it's amazing to see where our leads take us. Early on, Jessie was researching Theodore Vail, who was the first president of AT&T, and she found that he had built an estate in Vermont named Speedwell, after Speedwell Farms in New Jersey, which is connected to Alfred Vail and the telegraph. And we then learned that, oh, of course, it's only 20 minutes from where my family vacations in the very northern part of Vermont where nothing is. And so this summer I took a little detour and got a tour of the Vail Museum at Northern Vermont University. These chairs are kind of their pride and joy. Vail commissioned these chairs, the story goes, so that he and his buddy, President Taft, could have private fireside chats with no one listening in. I told Jessie, I'm not really sure about that because it was his private estate, so like, who's listening? But don't tell them I said that. That's their favorite story at the Vail Museum. A few other sites this summer saw Jessie and I exploring radio wave sites throughout New Jersey. This is the Ocean Gate, obviously now abandoned radio site, Deal Test site in Monmouth County. And then you can see here, Jessie and her daughter Natalie trekking through Mercer Meadows to track down the Lawrenceville Pole Farm.
Okay. So next we actually put out the call to the people to get the stories that were not as well known. Here you actually see a picture phone. The guy's using it at his desk in 1964. And this was actually sort of a flop, as a lot of housewives didn't really want to be seen on picture, on the camera, which I think everybody can relate to nowadays with all of our Zoom meetings. So we did a crowdsource effort in the summer of 2021. We put out a call online and in local papers, and we invited former Bell employees that worked in the system before 1984 to share their memories. We really thought it was important to do this for this exhibit in particular. As Beth mentioned, we were aware that there were tens of thousands of people that actually worked in the Bell system in New Jersey. There were all kinds of jobs to be had all over the state, whether it was being a building foreman for Murray Hill or soldering things at Western Electric. We felt that a lot of people were going to want to share their story with us. About 50 people responded. We had an operator, laser scientists, draftsmen, and mathematicians. And I'm going to give you just a few examples of people that we heard from. We couldn't include all of this information in the exhibit because we wrote a lot and we could not get it all on the walls, as our designers will tell you. So there was a lot to tell. So one of the first people to respond to the call was a man named Frank Sinden. When he called me, he shared memories of going to grad school in Europe. Frank already knew German, but he had to bone up on the language to study mathematics in Zurich, Switzerland, where he studied. Frank described as the MIT of Europe. He was there just after World War II. And he glimpsed some of the earliest computers to come to the continent after the war. He went to work for Bell Labs in 1957 and stayed there until 1995. After we spoke to him, he sent me a few write-ups, which actually really focused on his colleagues. We found that a lot of people were so humble about their achievements, so it was very nice to hear him talk about his memories of actually other people's accomplishments. But I'll just play this video. This is an excerpt from one of the earliest examples of computer animation, and Frank Sinden is actually, he actually worked on the cutting edge of computer animation in the 1960s. So this video is from 1965, which he did not mention in his phone call. But the way I found out about Frank's work was actually from the next person, A. Michael Knoll. We had already been referencing Dr. Knoll's article, Memories, A Personal History of Bell Labs, for almost a year. And I was very surprised to receive an email from him after we put out our crowdsource. After I read more about his background, I was a little nervous to call him, a little starstruck, getting into the Bell Labs research, but he spent 15 years doing basic research at Bell Labs, starting in 1961. Then he went on as a technical assistant to the president's science advisor at the White House, and he has since published numerous pieces about the history of Bell Labs. He was, of course, a pioneer in the field of digital art, but we will touch back on his one of his very special projects in just a bit. We also heard about Dr. Sidney Millman from Memories of His Adoring Family, which I'd really like to give them especially a warm welcome tonight as they are joining us for the event, I think virtually. As an immigrant from Russia, Sidney Millman worked as an iron worker as he began to pursue the science field. Sidney was hired to Bell Labs in the 1940s as only the second Jewish scientist there, and became their first Jewish member of the physics department. He also wrote one of the volumes of History and Science of Engineering in the Bell System, which is about 650 pages explaining just the physics of the Bell System, with such chapter titles as optical and nonlinear optical materials and fused silica for helium separation by diffusion. So if you can imagine, Beth and I were, reading this all the time on the beach, right? He inspired new generations as part of the foundation of the Cooperative Research Fellowship Program, which helped people from minority communities get a foot in the door for a science career. He also went on to mentor and train at least one Nobel Prize winner, which is Arthur Ashkin. And finally, as his great niece, Elaine, wrote to me in an email, no picture of Sid would be complete without highlighting his love of opera. Sid serenaded himself and those nearby with arias he knew by heart. Sometimes we didn't always hear directly from Bell Labs alumnus, but rather we heard from someone who knew someone that got us connected to the right person. And we were lucky to get actually connected to two new historical societies that were new to Morven, at least, that we've never worked with them before. Patricia Miola from Summit Historical Society, which is in the same town as the Murray Hill campus, wrote to me after hearing about the Crowdsource effort. She suggested a few names of local people I could contact. Little did she know that one of the names that she had suggested was already one of my very favorite people that I had read about here. Oh, her name's getting blocked, but she's Erna Schneider Hoover. Hoover is an incredible person as the first female department head at Bell Labs. She holds one of the first software patents ever issued, and she's an amazing advocate for women valuing themselves and their professional work. She will be sending a circuit board for us to show in the exhibit after we connected by email. We arranged for a loan from her. Susan Allen from the Chatham Historical Society said that she had a scrapbook that she thought might be related to our exhibit. She was excited to share it with us because she wasn't really sure what to do with it. It didn't fit the mission of her historical society, so we had the perfect fit. The scrapbook started with entries from 1945 and included things like Christmas programs and letters and photos about the Murray Hill Chorus, which is an employee club. Beth and I were already really interested in the huge array of clubs that they had available to employees. Susan sent some preview shots to make sure that we wanted the book. We were thrilled to see a familiar name in there, which was Capitola Dickerson, which you see on the right. We had first heard about Cappy, as she's nicknamed, through the writings of Frank Sinden, our first crowdsource guy. She had perfect pitch. She taught music to the children of Bell Labs, and Frank's description of her was so impressive that we were really hoping to include her in our exhibit in some way. Through more research, we found out that she was actually one of the first Black women to work at Bell Labs. She was an employee in the ceramics department. She also found a rising star in being an accompanist and vocalist for the Murray Hill Chorus in the 1940s. The scrapbook is just filled with letters praising her work and photos of her at the piano, and they're all taken during the golden age at Murray Hill. We can't show the whole book in the exhibit due to the binding and space restrictions we have, because we really filled our cases, but as a special treat, we will pull the scrapbook out after our program to show you in person tonight. So to put together a museum exhibit, we weren't just looking for stories like these, but we were also looking for stuff to put in the galleries.
So on one of my visits to the Deal test site, our friends there said, oh, there's this guy in Red Bank, you should really connect with him. We've been trying to get him in for an oral history. We're not sure exactly what he did, but it sounds like he's definitely worth a phone call. So they put me in touch with John Petrarca, who's the guy on the left there. And when I finally got him on the phone, he said, I don't want you to get too excited. I'm not a scientist. Like, I'm just an artist. And I was like, sir, I have been reading about radio waves for 2 weeks. I would love to talk to an artist. Like, please, when can I come? So he graciously welcomed Jesse and I into his home. And as soon as we got there, he had all this stuff laid out in his studio. And he started off by telling us that he had started as a draftsman in Western Electric in Jersey City. And then he transferred to Manhattan. So this is the 1960s, and he's at work on the Lower West Side, and his boss comes up to him, he says, tomorrow you're going to Hillside, New Jersey. Just report to the plant at Hillside. He gets to Hillside, and it turned out that he was there to draw and sketch the making of the Telstar. So Telstar 1 is the first active communication satellite launched in 1962. So he was like, you probably don't want any of this. And we were like, we want all of this. And so that picture that's actually on the table, we left with that day in that blue bag laying on the table. And we're like, Jill, look what we got. And she's like, are you seriously carrying that in that blue bag? It's like grocery bag. And Ray Jesse, he was like, you can just take whatever you want. So that picture there is a full drawing of the Hillside clean room and all the workers working on the Telstar. And it was amazing to talk to him. He was like, yeah, I didn't really know what it was. And now I look back on these things that I sketched, and it's like unbelievable. But it was often used for promotion in magazines, ways to make it communicable to the public. So we'll be borrowing that. And simultaneously, Jesse and I had been aggressively trying to find a actual Telstar. So they obviously built some backups. They built 4. One is still floating around probably in pieces in space, but we knew there were 3 that did not launch, that were backups. And with the help of our friends at Nokia, we located this one at Bedminster. And this picture was just 2 days ago. Jill, Jesse, and I went to figure out how the heck we can get this thing to Morven, but we're gonna do it, and we're gonna have it on view in the garden room starting at the end of March. We're gonna crate her up and bring her over. And then we'll have a smaller model in the galleries, because of course this doesn't fit in the doorways upstairs. Okay, so next we thought we'd each share a story of some of the things that we were just surprised to learn, and some of these things don't always make it in. So I'm gonna go first, actually. This is one that barely made it in. I'm from Monmouth County, and I think Jesse and I were working on our last labels, and she's like, wait, did you know this? And so this is in Atlantic Highlands, which if you've been to the Highlands, you know that it's high land overlooking Sandy Hook. And in 1939, the Bell system purchased this bungalow on a residential street. It's still there, it's a private home now, to test radar. Because some genius at Bell Labs literally figured out that the elevation of this house is about equal to the height of an antenna on top of a battleship when you're like looking down into New York Harbor. So they would work on the radar equipment in Whippany, New Jersey, and then bring it down to the Highlands to test it at this little bungalow, and would basically just use ships in New York Harbor as radar targets, because this was like the perfect height elevations. So that was one where we're like, all right, stop everything, we gotta sneak this in somehow. And it's just amazing. So there is a guy who's living here now who's working on making this, getting himself a historic plaque, which he should definitely get. Here's Jesse's.
All right, another thing that we were surprised to learn was how Bell Labs actually connected with science fiction. So John Pierce started at Bell Telephone Laboratories in 1936, and he was the director of research from 1952 to 58. He worked on everything from helping to name the transistor, to instigating Ma Bell's satellite program, to composing digital music. He also wrote science fiction published under the name J.J. Coupling. In some cases, actually, science fiction provided inspiration for real-life projects, but sometimes it was the other way around. John Pierce was friends with Arthur C. Clarke, who was an important science fiction writer in his own right. He wrote the screenplay for 2001's Space Odyssey, which was, of course, then turned into a famous film directed by Stanley Kubrick in 1968. Clarke actually came to Murray Hill to visit his friend John Pierce, where he was given demonstrations of computer music. That turned out to be his inspiration for the computer Hal at the end of the movie, singing Daisy Bell. John Pierce and A. Michael Knoll, which you may remember from our crowdsource effort, also advised on set decoration for the picture phone the picture phone booth in the movie. Knoll's exact designs were used in the movie down to the Bell logo, which you see there. And you can also see it actually inside the picture booth. This picture to the left is his designs. When the movie came out, Knoll actually got a complaint from a manager because, in his own words, the use of the Bell seal implied that the Bell system was providing telecommunication service outside the United States, which court decree forbade it from doing. It was already too late, though, because the movie was released, but John Pierce came to Knoll's defense. The crowdsource connections and other special stories that you see here are only the tip of the iceberg. Like I mentioned, we had so much content that we could barely fit it on the walls and in the exhibit cases. There are 5 galleries that span the story from the 1870s to 1984. And Beth is going to give us a little sneak peek into the galleries.
Okay, so usually Jesse and I just start pretty basic with our low-tech model, so beautifully built for us by Richard Pierce in the front row here. That model is also like 10 years old. It works really well though, and you can see even if it's just posted, it's kind of getting our themes where they need to be. But one of the things that we quickly realized is while we had all these really fabulous three-dimensional objects for cases, there wasn't a lot to hang on the wall aside from John Petrarca's amazing artwork. And so what we realized is we had seen incredible photographs from the get-go. We knew we loved these photos that we were encountering, but we needed a designer to help us blow them up and make them beautiful. If you can picture what our Lindbergh exhibit looked like and being able to kind of step into those black and white photographs, that's what we wanted to recreate whenever we could. And so that would require the help of an exhibit designer. On the left here, I'm giving you a peek at our biggest trick, which is we just use Pinterest when we get started. So as you might, that's our board on the left scrolling. But as you might imagine, when you first start, you're poring over photos, you're reading a million articles, and you don't really know what you're looking for yet or how it's going to come together. So this is our trick to get started, is you just pin it. If you like it, you pin it, and then you can get yourself back to it when you're looking for it. It's also a really great way to share design inspiration. So once we met with our designers, they're like, can you send us any photos? Or like, oh, we can send you an entire board of photos. And so we just shared our Pinterest board. And from that, they pulled out some of these gorgeous historic photos and came up with this color scheme that you see on the right here. And the minute we saw, they present you with a couple options. And as soon as we saw these colors, we were like, that is it. We just love the feel. Gallery 1 starts early in the 1890s and 1880s. So you have this dark brown getting through the 30s and 40s and 50s. So we just loved those colors immediately. We talk about type. We are using the Swiss International, which is the big one, and then that smaller typewriter font for our captions. Kind of easy to read, but hearkening back to these early days in the 50s and 60s at the labs. This we didn't know about though. Our designers, we should have known, right? That there's a type called Bell Centennial invented by Bell System, of course. Why didn't we think of that? So this funny little font was invented for Bell, for the Bell System, while they were printing phone directories. As you can imagine, they wanted to buy less paper. They wanted to fit more text on one line and smaller and smaller and smaller. And those little divots that you see are called ink traps. And the ink traps are used to avoid ink spread when you're printing tiny on newsprint, if you can picture how that would go. And so you never really see these. You can never really see the trap because they're doing their job. You only see it when you blow it up. So we decided we would use this for some big title fonts and our blown up quotations. Oop. I lost the slide. Oh, weird. Okay. So here's a peek at some of our galleries. Okay, so on the top there, that if you can picture Morven's staircase into the top hallway, you can see some of how we pulled those colors into accent walls. So our hallway is this nice blue. This is gallery 3 on the bottom here with it's called split green pea wall. And as you can see, when we could, we blew up those photos the way that we wanted to, that you can really see some of these historic shots. So on the bottom, that's Carl Jansky and his rotating antenna known as Jansky's merry-go-round. That's in Holmdel, New Jersey. And then above the black table, you can see we're going to have a number of interactives throughout the show. That front hallway will be a place where we can continue to capture memories from visitors who come through and at work, because we're hoping that we get a lot of former employees here with the memories to share. And then this is gallery 4. This will be the gallery about Murray Hill and women in the labs and Ma Bell Goes to War. And I wanted to show you this fun design element of dots and lines that we have kind of playing on the theme of connection and connecting people through telecommunication. You can see Erna up there over the fireplace. So I wanted to make sure that you're all saving the date. We'll have a special members reception on March 10th at 5:30. You will hopefully get to meet even some of these people that we were talking about today. I'm gonna get John Petrarca here if I have to drive him myself. And we have member-only hours for the first time. That will be Friday and Saturday, where our members get to come see the exhibit before it opens to the general public. And then we open to the public on Sunday, March 13th. And then, if you think that was exciting, you have no idea what kind of programs Debbie has pulled together for this exhibit. When I tell you that we went to Debbie with a wish list of like, if we could get Laurie Spiegel, that'd be great. Like, yeah, sure, you're gonna get Laurie Spiegel. Debbie got Laurie Spiegel. If we could have John Gertner, who wrote the book that we use every second of every day, well, John Gertner's coming for Telephone Day on April 25th. So you're gonna get a link to this tonight too, but we think these are going to sell out fast, so we really hope you'll join us. Black Scientific Renaissance at Bell Labs, unbelievable scientists here with us on May 17th. So Jill, you're there.
Well, as you can see, something like Ma Bell, Mother of Invention in New Jersey, is a huge undertaking, one we could not have achieved without the tremendous efforts of our curatorial team, Beth Allen and Jesse Gordon. Thank you both for your hard work. As just mentioned, we also have an amazing roster of programs that Debbie Lampert-Redmond have arranged. You heard about just a few of them here, but trust me, there are more. Many more, if you know Debbie, that are in the works. I would also like to thank all of our sponsors that made this show a reality. This was really a heavy lift. It's a 2-year project that you're seeing here that we're very excited about. Of course, AT&T, the Hess Foundation, Liza and Sky Morehouse, the Estelle Alpol Foundation, Lounsbury Foundation, Lisa and Michael Ullman, Fulton Bank and Sean Murray, and Church and Dwight. Our special exhibitions are only part of what we do. It is because of members like you that we are able to operate day to day, year in and year out, pre-pandemic, mid-pandemic, and hopefully soon post-pandemic. I'd like to acknowledge the New Jersey Council for the Humanities for a special COVID grant that they gave us for operating through really the depths of our pandemic shutdown. Finally, I'd like to thank Megan Shackney and Kathy O'Hara for making this evening an actual event, and the behind-the-scenes wizardry of Joe Murphy, who brought all of our friends in virtually. It takes a village to pull this off, and I have a great team. So I want to thank you all, and we'll open it up for Q&A now. So Beth and Jesse?
Any questions?
Was Alexander Graham Bell from New Jersey?
He was from Scotland.
Yeah,
He was from,
But he was up in northern New Jersey, I thought.
no, so the telephone was invented in Boston. And then it's really Theodore Vail who's the first New Jersey link as the first AT&T president. So we will talk about him because we have to lay that groundwork of the first telephone call, but that history really is not New Jersey history. But the rest of it is. That's it.
So several years ago, I read the Gertner book. It's like the best non-fiction book I've ever read.
So good.
And one character, of course, that stands out is William Shockley. I know he's very controversial, but did you make any contact with his family or?
No, so we cover, do you want me to talk about Shockley? So for those who don't know, Shockley worked on the Transistor. And beyond being just a difficult personality, he was huge into eugenics, white supremacy. So we do cover him. We did not try to reach out to him, or, I mean, he's not alive. We did not try to reach out to his family, but we do talk about that piece of the history for sure. Yeah. Anything else about him?
Growing up in the area, I remember as a visit, looking at this presentation, our phone number was Murray Hill 9779. Was that kind of the norm for all phone numbers in the different Bell areas?
So we actually talk, can you hear me? Okay. I don't know. I'll turn it off. So we do talk about how the phone numbers changed throughout the years. We talk about Morven's first phone number. First phones actually didn't have any dials on them because you would just pick it up and talk to your operator. And then they created the 10-digit phone number with area codes and all of that just before 1951. And the first direct dial national phone call from coast to coast was actually in New Jersey. So it was the 1951 New Jersey call from Inglewood, and the mayor called the other mayor of Alameda, California. So we kind of go into a little bit of the phone number and how that affected the automation, how phone numbers kind of changed as operators became less and less, and your phone calls were a little bit more automated.
Jesse, can you tell the story of the operator that left their post for a moment?
Oh, that was the Halley's Comet. So we read about in the Princeton Historical Society, they had a couple accounts of early operators in Princeton, and there was one that got in trouble because she left her post to go see Halley's Comet overnight. They were really required to, I think they were they called in every hour to prove that you were actually at your post, and she really wanted to go see this comet, so.
I can't blame her.
Any other questions? Well, we'll be sticking around for a little bit after too. We're gonna pull out the scrapbook, so we're happy to answer more questions then as well. But
Thank you all.
Yes, I did. I loved it. That was the one that I actually wanted when somebody said it was sold.